Welcome, everyone. Hi, I'm Leila Buck. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm joining you from the unceded lands of the Nantego peoples, colonially known as Delaware. Normally, I live and work on the unceded Munsee Lenape land, colonially known as Brooklyn. I'm an Arab American writer and performer and the moderator of today's talkback on 11 Reflections on September by Andrea Assaf, presented by the Arab American National Museum as part of their Arab film series, in collaborative partnership with ArteEast and the Arab Film and Media Institute. 11 Reflections on September is, as those of you who've seen it will know, a poetry, music, movement, and digital media exploration of Arab American experience, wars on and of terror, and the constant, quiet reign of death amidst beauty that each autumn brings in a post-9/11 world. It's available to be screened until September 16th, and I strongly encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity while you can. For more information and to view the film, if you haven't already, you can go to arabamericanmuseum.org. And now it is my pleasure and honor to introduce our two artists with us today, two of the primary artists from 11 Reflections. First is Andrea Assaf, the artistic director of Art to Action and writer, director, and performer of 11 Reflections on September. She is also one of my fellow steering committee members on the Middle Eastern North African Theater Makers Alliance, MINATMA, which amplifies the voices of Middle Eastern and North African theater makers and expands how stories from and about our communities are told on US stages. For more info on MINATMA and our work, you can go to minatheater.org, theater with an R-E. I've also known Andrea for many years from our first meeting at the Rawi Conference of Arab American Writers and numerous events at the museum. And I've had the chance to see her in action as a performer, producer, community organizer, facilitator, and in the live performance of the piece in New York. It is always a joy to connect with you, Andrea, and your work, and I'm excited to hear more from you and talk more about it very soon.
Thank you so much for being our moderator, Leila. It's really wonderful to spend this time with you.
My pleasure and my honor. And it is also such a joy to be here with Lubana Quntar, whose work you will see if you have not already in this film. She is the lead vocal performer, and her beautiful, powerful voice you will hear throughout the piece. She was born in Damascus, Syria, to a family of traditional singers and is a descendant of the famous Syrian singer Amal al-Atrash and renowned composer and singer Farid al-Atrash. She trained in classical international conservatories under the supervision of world-renowned opera singers and sings in folk, traditional Syriac and Aramaic languages, pop, and classical opera. She has won numerous prizes for her work, including first Arab opera singer from Syria. She's toured internationally across Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, and North America. And between 2006 and 2012, she served at the Syrian National Conservatory as the voice chair for the Department of Opera Singing, where she founded and launched the Department of Classical Arabic Singing, which allowed students to study both Western and Arabic forms together for the very first time. So we have two incredible performers with us. And if you have not seen their work in the film, I strongly encourage you to do so. It is fierce and moving. It is rich and complex and powerful. The intersection of music and language and visuals is just beautiful. And I want to also name the music and percussion of Elam and April and the movement from Dora. You can read the full program also about the piece at arabamericanmuseum.org. So with that, there's a lot more I can say, but that's a lot from me, and I'd love to hear from each of you about your roles in this work. So maybe let's start with you, Andrea. Could you talk a little bit about the original impetus for the project, and if you don't mind sharing also your pronouns and where you are joining us from?
Sure. I use she or they pronouns. I welcome both. And I am today calling in from Tampa, Florida, which is the land of the Seminole and Tocobaga peoples. And Tampa is actually a Seminole word, which a lot of folks don't know. So I'm, first of all, really excited to spend this time with Lubana and with you, Leila. And this piece has gone through so many iterations and evolutions really since it began. Here we are marking the 20th anniversary of the event of 9/11, the tragic event of 9/11, 2001. And also pretty soon we'll be marking the 20th anniversary of the US invasion of Afghanistan in a couple weeks. So it's a moment that it's really brings yet another wave of new resonance to this project. But initially, I began writing it and really just writing poems as a way of processing, being both a New Yorker and an Arab American at the time in 2001 in New York City. And it really wasn't until 2007 that I started collecting those individual poems and realizing, oh, I think this is a series about the post 9/11 era, or what we can now look back on as the post 9/11 era in the United States and in the world. And so I had a writing residency at Hedgebrook, which is a residency program for women writers. It's a beautiful place if you ever get to go. And I started pulling the poems together there and reading them as a set. And in 2011, I had the opportunity to be an artist in residence with Pangea World Theater in Minneapolis with the support of a Princess Grace Award, which gave me the opportunity to fully stage the poetry series. And the experiment kind of was, well, I wonder what will happen if I take, this aesthetic that I have as a third generation American, Arab American, that is very New York, is very spoken word, is very experimental theater, and invite artists who play Middle Eastern music and invite musicians and vocalists and see how these forms might talk to each other. And I also knew that media had to be a strong part of the piece, because the media has been such a strong part of our experience of both 9/11 and the wars that followed and all of the historical events that have followed since. So that's what it became, this kind of interdisciplinary collaboration. And then I every time I feel like every time the show is remounted, I have to write a new ending, because what's happening in the world keeps changing, and it's meant to be responsive. Maybe we can talk more about that later.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I will also say that I actually was struck, knowing this must have been created, obviously, at least a little while ago, the film version, how resonant it remains already. So yeah, I look forward to hearing more about those current resonances and what you're looking to explore from here with it. Lubana, you raised the music, Andrea, which is such an integral part of the piece. How did you connect first? How did you, had you worked together before? Was this your first project? How did that collaboration begin?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to speak about this incredible project that Andrea wrote. And yeah, we met, I think, after the another incredible project made by an incredible director, Heather Reffo, and it was also projected this conflict, the war conflicts, and it was called El Fallujah. So we've met after that, and Andrea spoke to me about her next project, and yeah, we took it from there. We performed it on stage like several times, and our last performance was online. We were like thrilled to redo it again, but yeah, and it came out wonderfully made.
Absolutely, it's really powerful. And having seen the version live and then seen the online version, I'm
Yeah.
really struck by the power of both.
Yeah.
And I'd love to hear each of you maybe talk about that transition from the stage version, what that was for you, how you decided to do that, the inspiration, the process, any challenges, discoveries. And Lubana, I forgot to ask you if you don't mind sharing your pronouns and where you're joining us from.
I am joining you from Virginia, and yeah.
And what are your preferred pronouns? I forgot to ask you.
Preferred, like the opera singer, performer.
Oh, like a she or he or they or
whatever, she.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, and so if you don't mind just sharing a bit about that inspiration for that transition from stage to
for me as an opera singer, used to sing in a big production on stage, dealing with a lot of musicians, orchestra, actors, dancers, big audience. It was so different to imagine all that when you are performing alone with no all this element around you. But at the same time, my personal feeling about this, that I like the challenges. I like to see where I could go and where is this going. It's so interesting to see the progress and to see it at the end, like it comes alive and so real after small you're putting like a puzzle, you're putting bit by bit, like the music, the poet, the acting. Even with the previous meeting, I've said like it was in one of the songs that I did. I share this with Andrea. We're supposed to be like connecting or interacting with each other, looking to each other, but obviously she's not with me. But literally I could feel, by just hearing her voice and imagining what a powerful poet, what a powerful meaning of her words. Like I could feel the I could feel it in the air, if I may say. Like it was so intense that even that we were connected in a way. Yeah, so it was incredible for me personally. It was really an incredible experience and very, very interesting. And yeah, I loved every minute of it.
It's certainly, I could feel that connection. That was one of the things that really struck me in how the piece was done and edited, and you could feel that emotional connection between you in a way that made me forget the form in that way. Sorry, Andrea, I know you wanted to also add to that.
No, thank you. There's so much to say. And I have to say, Lubana was such a sport with the whole process, because the technology of it was quite challenging, especially with music. And I think it helped so much that we had performed it live together. The last live performance that we did together was 2016 for the National Asian American Theater Festival, which was at Oregon Shakespeare Festival, or OSF, produced by the Consortium of Asian American Theaters and Artists. And so we had that experience of doing it together and being able to see each other in the space and feeling, the impact of the vibration, that you feel in live performance that you can't quite feel in this digital world, to draw from, I think, as Lubana was saying, to remember and try to recreate in digital space. But it was such a challenge, because it wasn't a plan, really. The plan had been that we were supposed to tour and perform live in person at the Carver Community Cultural Center in San Antonio, Texas. And first it was, because of the pandemic, postponed for a year. And then as we got closer to that postponement date a year later, we began to realize that it still wasn't going to be possible to do an in-person show yet in which was scheduled for May 1st, 2021. So about 6 weeks before, the carver asked, could you make this a digital performance? And, you know, as theater artists often do, we just say yes before we even fully understand what it will mean to do that. We just say, yes, I can do that in good improvisation form. Just say yes and go with it. And I don't think any of us really understood what we'd said yes to until we were in it. Because we had all of us we were all in different locations. I'm in Tampa, Florida. Elam was in Los Angeles, and Lubana in the Washington, D.C. area, and April in New Jersey, and Dora also here in Tampa, Florida. But then our designers were in London, Ava Auster and Matt Eaton, who did incredible digital design work and sound design, were in London. So we were dealing with the time differences, and we lost at least a week, I think, in trying to figure out platforms and a process that would allow us, allow the musicians to hear each other. Which meant a lot of recording and re-recording and sending each other files. And finally, we worked out this way that we could use Zoom and direct a camera angle or a shot through the Zoom camera. And then each performer would have to go out of Zoom, record a few takes by themselves, and send us the takes, which we'd then review and then say, okay, that take, we can work with that, or there was a technical problem, we have to do it again, or whatever it is. And we had to do that for each and every scene, camera angle, and moment. And then Ava had the incredible job of putting it all together to create the illusion that we were in shared space, even though we were all thousands of miles apart. So it was quite a process and a challenge, but fascinating. And one of my board members, Cherie Greer, who's the executive director of Kitchen Table Literary Arts, she's been teasing me that we accidentally made an art film. We were trying to figure out how to do digital theater, but we kind of made an art film.
You certainly did, and it's beautiful work. I'm so glad that you mentioned the design team, because it's really incredible, and I want to again encourage everyone to look at the digital program and learn more about their work, because the way that it's put together, and to hear you describe that part of it is just so intense and so beautifully done. And you know, the other thing that I would love to ask you both about is the sort of other element for me of the piece, and I'm sure for many watching, is the weaving of languages, the weaving of Arabic and English. Certainly another beautiful part of your presence in the piece, Lubana. So I'm wondering if you could each talk a little about the choice of when to integrate Arabic music, how you chose those pieces, and their intersection with the English, themes of the piece. And particularly since I know you weren't able to have subtitles for the Arabic, there's so much richness in sort of the meaning of the Arabic and how it intersects with the English. And so I'd love to hear you talk about any aspect of that sort of linguistic connection.
Andrea, if you start.
Oh, no, Lubana. Okay, I wanted Lubana to start because I think it's important to talk about the process. I mean, the other thing that was both challenging and wonderful about this process was that because we weren't in a room together physically, we really had to trust each other's choices as artists. And Lubana actually made the selection, selected the majority of the music, particularly the songs with lyrics that are in the piece. And because I don't speak Arabic as a third generation American, it's a life goal, but I don't speak yet. I really had to just trust Lubana's intuition and knowledge of the piece and knowledge as an extraordinary artist herself. And it myself was discovering the resonances of the layering as we were talking through those choices. And so I'd love to hear Lubana talk more about the songs that are in the piece and how you decided, actually.
Yeah. I mean, the song of وترحل, for example. I know, I'm sure that many of the audience, the Arabic audience, they know this particular song. It is so, it means this screams this the musician wrote this song because of the loss of his son, and I was touched by this song, since I was little, and I used to sing it all the time. And when Andrea was performing, or was saying this powerful poet, and she was trying to scream, she was doing this, and wanted to express, and there's no voice left, like there's no words left to say except a scream or any kind of expression about the terrible situation. I immediately thought about this song, and because of the rhythm of the song, it's like it goes with no, especially the beginning, with no rhythm. It's just starting with وترحل, that means and you go, my scream is getting weak. So it's exactly, it matches what I see, and it immediately resonate with my feeling. So I felt this is immediately, this is the choice, and I sang it for her. I remember in San Antonio, and she immediately accepted, and especially when I translated to her. So we kept that in this in the production, and also another choice was Ya Ghazali. It's a poet by Amin al-Jundi. It's a poet about longing for the beloved ones, but I think as Arabs, we always, switch between, okay, the loved, the beloved ones. It also could be your country, your in a poet, you can use that. So Ya Ghazali, it's about longing to your beloved, and you wanted to see him. Somebody was or something terrible happened, make you apart of apart. So and this rhythm of this song is imitate the sobbing, like it's in a funeral kind of music. So yeah, that was also a rhythmic, funerally, in the back of my mind, like it's like it imitates also this funeral. So I choose it, and it was perfect as a background for Andrea's poet as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lubana. I just want to say how struck, part of why I'm asking this question is that what really struck me as soon as I started to hear the Arabic and the music was the resonance with what she was saying, was the connection. And it made me go, because I wasn't recognizing every word. I went and sort of was like, wait, that's Fairuz. I'm going to go look that, and found the sort of English translation and was like, oh my gosh, yeah, the resonance. So even though the English translation I know is always a little less than the original poetry, right? But Arabic. Yeah. So yeah, I commend you for the beautiful, beautiful choices and the resonances.
For me, it's a click, it's a choice, something immediately happened. When I hear something, I feel like it resonates with me and with my background, culture, and music, and so it was amazing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Really beautiful collaboration experience for me as well, and I'm so grateful for Lubana's collaboration in this project. I just always feel so honored to.
Thank you, Andrea. The honor is mine. And you know, the English, the summer rain was Andrea's choice. It wasn't me. I was a little bit like, okay, let's do that. So Andrea chose this wonderful song, and I was like, okay, we could put this the with Fayrouz song. We could put it together and sing jazzy. Uh, with Fayrouz. So it was also a good choice. Thank you, Andrea, because it was also another challenge for me, So
That's
singing jazz.
the rendition of Autumn Leaves that is in the piece. And I have to say, what's so extraordinary about working with you, Lubana, is that it's so rare as a director that you get to work with someone where you can say, I would like some classical Arab music and a little bit of Mozart, and how about a jazz standard? And she says, yes, I can do that. It's just extraordinary. And then when Lubana created this kind of medley of the English jazz standard version of Autumn Leaves and the Arabic, it was just perfect. And that was brand new for this version of
Yeah.
the project. We've never done that before.
I thought because I didn't remember that from the live one, and I thought, did I forget that? Did I miss that? It was such a beautiful moment of, they're doing that. Oh, I see what they're doing. Just using again the language of music, and these multiple languages is just so powerful. And you did. I also want to ask you. You mentioned Summer Rain, which is another section.
Summer Rain, yeah.
The piece that that is. I believe, Andrea, inspired by the 2006 Israeli bombardment of Lebanon and the
yes, that's correct. War.
And one of the things that struck me as someone who was in Lebanon that summer, that piece resonates so deeply on so many levels, and seeing the visuals with it in this was also very powerful. And I'm curious because, of course, I know that operation was called Summer Rain, that the Israeli operation was called Summer Rain, but others may not. And so just there are things like that in the piece, the richness and the layering and the resonance of your work. And I'm curious if you could talk more about, are there other maybe resonances that we might not know unless we know certain things in the piece, or if there's any part of that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, thank you for naming that. I think that there's, well, it's part of the nature of poetry, right? Is that you don't actually explain every reference, or it can't. Sometimes it comes so quickly in the sense that, part of the experience is this feeling of trying to keep up with a bombardment, quite literally, of images and associations. But my hope by having those kind of I don't want to say hidden references, but because they're there for anyone who does know them or cares to look, is that that will spark a conversation. That's a way we can then begin to dialogue about, well, I connected with this moment or line because of my experience. And then someone else in the audience says, oh, I didn't know that, but I connected with this because of another reason. I think another piece that's a good example of that in the show is the piece called This Woman, This Sea, which I perform as a kind of duet with Lubana. Because that poem in particular is made of stories, of a number of different stories from different people and different locations. And in fact, the beginning of it was originally written about Somalia at a time when I was doing a project where I was collaborating with Somali refugee women who had been relocated to Massachusetts. And in the process of working on that project, one of the collaborators, her sister actually was killed in trying to escape from Somalia by boat. And that's the beginning of the piece, is actually about her. But then years later, when I performed it again, everyone's association was with Syria and the more recent refugee crisis, with people coming from Syria and trying to cross the Mediterranean. So, you know, there's something about poetry that has this porousness and this ability to connect to multiple stories across time and across identity. That piece also has stories about US military veterans and women in a protest in India on the border between India and Bangladesh. So it's just full of these specificities that hopefully open conversations across communities, across experiences, across memories and identities.
Absolutely. And that the universality of that specificity, you know, is really powerful. And also what you say, the way that poetry, because it's not saying this is about this exact thing and let me spell it out for you, allows that openness, and that intersection is really powerful. I'm thinking of the who will write this woman's story. It really struck me, that listing of these places. I think I wrote it somewhere that I'm not finding. But yeah, Iraq, this drowning, who will write her story, drowning in this sea of Iraq, Bengal, Somalia, Lebanon, Congo, Bahrain, Yemen, Syria, Libya, Afghanistan, Palestine, ya Allah. It's just such a powerful moment of making those connections also for those who may not be thinking of them in whatever direction.
And yeah, and I hope that people who don't know the references will ask. Like, I hope it will get us as a nation, as an audience, as communities to say, well, what does Tahrir have to do with 9/11, right? What is Afghanistan? I just recently had a conversation in which I heard a young person say, why are we still talking about 9/11? Why aren't we talking about Afghanistan? And I was like, like, wow, that's an intergenerational conversation we need to have, right? And so I hope that the piece provokes those questions, that gets us to talk about certainly US military policy in the Middle East, but also everything that's been happening in the region in the last 20 years, and what the connections are, and what role we play in all of it.
Absolutely. I mean, that's certainly, you mentioned this in the beginning, and I would love to sort of hear each of you speak, if you would like, to the ripples of the piece now. You know, so much that one of the very powerful things in the piece is the way that it is a reflection in so many levels, and that it asks us to reflect on how these things are connected. And the ripples of that day in so many parts of our lives here and around the world. So I'm curious if there are other reflections of that day, or what has rippled from it, that you've been reflecting on since making this piece, that you hope to share or expand. Anything that this week's anniversary, the events in Afghanistan, have sparked for you. Just anything you want to share about this moment for you in reflection on the piece.
Lubana, did you want to say anything first?
Well, it's for me, it's always emotional to when it comes to the struggle of women, the struggle of children, the struggle of, you know, the aftermath of a war, or you know, as you know, I'm Syrian, and we've been dealing with this situation since 10 years, start of the uprising, and we saw this every day. Even if I'm here in United States, I was connected all the time with what was happening in Syria. And now we see that in Afghanistan, and we see that. So it's for me, it's it's so frustrating to see like the same things happen all over again in many countries, and history repeat itself with no understanding or learning from the mistakes. So yeah, it's so frustrating. And actually, we personally, I lost hope. I I can't. The first 3 year of the Syria uprising, I was like, I lost my voice. There was 3 years of just um, seeing this every day, and not accepting that, like it's happening to us. And yeah, it's so sad. Like we are in a time that we unfortunately we get used to, and this is the sad and the the sad part of it. Like we are used to see this every day in the news and in our life. Like it is okay, this is part of life. Like this is okay, we see people, get killed, detained, uh, and it's normal. Like people say, well, this is life. I mean, this is the circle of life. I really, I meet with people. They are accepting that as part of life, and this is so sad.
It is. It's such a time of so much despair. Suffering and despair, certainly in Syria and so many places. And yeah, I have another question about that, but I also want Andrea. I know you wanted to also share.
Yeah, there's so many things going through my mind. As you know, Leila, I was just in New York for a commemorative event in the West Village, uh, which I wish you had been able to be there for. It was lovely, put together by Rattlestick Playwrights Theater and a number of wonderful partners, and it was very. It was very moving to be in New York at that moment with all of the contradictions that that this moment of commemoration holds for me, right? The importance of acknowledging the people who died in the tragedy that day, and including, there's a fire station on my block in the East Village, and a lot of firefighters were first responders that day, and they lost a number of people, and they were doing a ceremony. I woke up to bagpipes, and I went by to pay my respects, because no matter what I think about the policies that followed, I still have to honor the people that literally sacrificed their lives trying to save people that day. And also, at the same time, hold the truth that what followed was more tragedy and more war and more loss of life. And I actually said, 9/11 was not only a tragedy for New York City, it was an unleashing of tragedy that we have been living since. And when we say never forget, we need to mean all of it, not only one day in New York, but all the tragedy that followed in Iraq, Afghanistan, the uprisings that swept across the Arab world now that we call the Arab Spring, and the struggles that continue in Syria and Palestine and Afghanistan. And it is hard to hold all of those things. It's hard to hold those truths simultaneously. And yet it's what I think we have a responsibility to do, is to ethically look at what the United States did in response to the tragedy of 9/11 and have real conversations so that we don't keep repeating history, as Lubana said, so that we can think about how do we change course? How do we change? How does the US change? And the piece, the 11 reflections, the first time I was writing it in 2010, it ended with the piece called Judgment. It ended in a place of despair. And while I was working on staging it, the Tunisian revolution began, and then Tahrir Square began. And suddenly in spring 2011, there was this moment of hope and possibility. And in 2011, that the show ended with the tribute to Tahrir Square. And then when we remounted it in 2015 and 16, it was clear that that wasn't a truthful ending anymore. And then I wrote the piece In the Blood of Spring. And yet, as Lubana says, there's so much despair still and so much struggle still. But I have to believe that that change is a process, that revolution is a process, that we're in the moment of tragedy and struggle still, but we haven't seen the ending yet. That sometimes revolution takes a long time. It's not an event that happens in one moment. It's change that happens over sometimes generations. And as artists, how do we keep alive that sense of possibility and hope, even in our darkest moments? And that's what I try to accomplish in my work.
And that's one of certainly just very powerfully said, and it reminds me, of course, of what you say in the work, which really struck me in hearing this time. And this idea that, even if she arrives in pieces, this child, this idea of freedom, if she only scatters seeds of the possibility of her being, that she's still in the world, and that it was such a powerful acknowledgement of the reality, and not, of looking at that sort of despair and uncertainty, and pain and suffering, and also being able to hold that doesn't mean that everything that came before it is lost. Everything that was good, that was found, that was inspired is lost. And that ability to hold those multiple truths, just as you name, holding the truth of honoring the firehouse, honoring the people who, literally ran in to give their lives so others could be saved, with the horror of what that day brought forth in the name of that. And so, holding all of that is such a powerful part of the piece, part of the role of art for so many of us. And I'd love to just hear anything else you each want to share about sort of the role of art for you in this time, the role of the piece itself, and also art more broadly, if you want. What's giving you hope? What is there something giving you comfort, inspiration, hope in this moment, and what is the relationship maybe of art to that for you?
Lubana, do you want?
Well, as for me, now I'm turning to write my own music and to do new songs, like completely me, because I used to sing for others. Like I sing, opera. Okay, I sing Kulthum, Asmahan, and for these great artists. But for the first time, maybe as a reflection of what is happening, I have so much to say. There is music, like it was built up during this years, and I feel there is so many emotions, so many things that I wanna express, and I'm so excited to have this. Finally, I'm doing this kind of projects. So yeah, this was my reaction, for 10 years of this madness. I felt, well, this is the my response is through music and through art, and with my voice I could, even with no words, I could express what's really inside me.
And that comes through so powerfully in the piece. I'm just remembering the moment when it's your voice without even words, and your expression without even words, Andrea. Those things beyond words that are conveyed in the piece and in art are so powerful.
Thank you, Lubana. That absolutely is true of your work. Like, it communicates far beyond language, and it reaches so many people. I've had so many people who don't speak Arabic at all, and maybe have never even heard music from our region, talk about how touched they are by your voice, Lubana, and by your singing. And it's a gift.
This really makes me so happy, and because I know, like, this is what I want. It's just, the connection between what you feel and how you present it to people, and you want people to connect with you. So this is, for me, this is like a medal.
A well-deserved one.
And I think, to answer your question, Leila, that's exactly what gives me hope, is those moments that art can create connection, that can absolutely upend stereotypes or assumptions that people have. I love that this piece happens to be, in this version of it, all women, and whatever ideas people might have about women from the Middle East when they come into it, I think we've completely upended by the end. I hope, in terms of who we are, and the diversity of who we are, and that we're able to collaborate. And so I think the ways and the times, the moments that we can create connection, even in creating or holding space for dialogue, or having those intergenerational discussions, or just getting people to ask questions, and do some research on something that they didn't know about before, and hopefully to keep asking ourselves these questions about, what does it mean to be accountable? What does it mean to be global citizens? What does it mean to rethink our future, to look honestly at our past and rethink our future and what is possible? I'm definitely a child of the World Social Forum movement, of the idea that another world is possible. If I didn't believe that, I don't think that I could keep going and creating, right? And so I think the role of artists is to be visionaries in that conversation, and make our work along the way, but stay in the global conversation about what is the other world that's possible, what do we want and need it to be, and how do we create it together.
Thank you so much. That's beautifully said. And you both are certainly doing that with your work, and with this piece. I'm so grateful for each of you, for this work, for your work beyond it, and for this time with you.
And I just want to acknowledge that you are doing that too, Leila, in your work all the time, everywhere. And it's just been wonderful to spend this time with you. And thank you so much for guiding us through the conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure and honor. And I want to just encourage everyone watching to watch the film if you haven't already, and continue to follow Lubana and Andrea's work for hope and inspiration in all kinds of forms. And thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.